All right. Well, welcome and shalom to everybody. I'm so glad to get an opportunity again tonight, yet again, to uh, to come from a place of sharing truth and looking for honesty and transparency and all of those things and the things we believe in. It's such an important part, and of course it is. They use it against us because it is, but you know, I'll use the term. So please, you have to give me some leeway here. I use the term lightly. That religion is a good thing because religion gives people some place to focus their attention, and so of course, on the other side, I think that it's probably becoming clear, especially to those people who have been with me for a while, that religion has some downsides. And so we're going to begin a journey. This is all like starting all over yet again for me. I don't know how many times in 30 years I've had to start over because we learned something and then we had to start over because we had to learn something. It seems like we get less and less time between rewriting songs. Now we don't even get to make it to the end of a songbook before we're already rewriting songs again. So, but that's all cool. It's perfect. It's wonderful. It's what the Creator. See, I struggle with so many things that have been planted inside of us. But if you're with me, then you know exactly the journey I've been on. And if you're new, then welcome to you. And hopefully you also can begin the journey of gaining enlightenment. And so we're going to look at some concepts that I think, if not for anybody else, it is for the people that have been with me. How do you make such a fast change, and how do you go from one side of the world to the other side of the world and do it in 2.3 seconds? Well, I do that because that's who I am. That doesn't always mean that that's the best manner for everyone else because a lot of people aren't me. And so uh, it's a worthwhile journey for us to have more of a desire to know what truth is than just to know something. And I think we'll plan that out. That will pan out. What I'm trying to say to you, I hope will get through into your heart before we're over whatever over is. So, so, but shalom to each and every one of you guys. It truly is a blessed day. It was beautiful outside, and got to get outside in nature today and wander around and get eaten up by ticks and found for the first time in my life on my property, I found wild strawberries, and I got to pick the fruit of the earth and eat them myself on my property, my wild strawberries. Wow. It's like amazing. Uh, so he really is a good creator father and mother earth. And so I have some things to say about that concept because I'm suspecting some of you who know me are probably struggling with how does that whole thing work out. And I don't know that I'll answer the question, but I certainly will give some stuff that hopefully will help you find some peace with it. So anyways, I got a million things to say, and I probably won't get half of them said, but let's pray, and then and Dave's going to blow the horn for us, and then we're going to get going. So Father, we thank you today for your wonderful love, your amazing mercy, the beautiful, gracious gifts you've given us to bring us to this point. 30 years of journey, and it's still just as new and just as if we've just begun. And so I do thank you that you are guiding those people whose hearts and minds will align with yours. And so I bless you tonight. Touch me, help me to be able to speak as clearly as possible and to use the right words that I might encourage, strengthen, and implant truth and reason and logic into my brothers and sisters' minds, that we all might know how to walk in peace in front of you. I thank you today Amen. Dave. All right. So we've encountered and we've begun on this journey uh, from full-blown Pentecostal Christianity to Sabbath-keeping full-blown Pentecostal Christianity to semi-Torah-keeping Sabbath-keeping Christianity to no Christianity and the Torah, and now, alas, no Torah. That's a pretty big journey. You people that have hung with me, man, y'all are some special people. I got to be honest with you, because there's a whole lot more weak-hearted people than there are strong people. And so I want to tell each and every one of you that I commend you, and I do honor you. You are valuable. It is important that we love truth enough to go through whatever, There's a concept that Yeshua taught in the New Testament, and he says that we are to follow wherever the Spirit listeth, is the language used in the King James Version. But what that really means is that we are supposed to listen to the Spirit inside of us, because it inevitably, if we're pure, it will lead us to truth. And I believe we're headed there on a very great basis. Some of you, and I'm going to spend most of the time really just kind of talking to some of the things that I suspect are coming up, some of the things I suspect that maybe you're going through, and some of the things that I know people are going through because I've talked to them. And so we really have a massive conundrum, if I could kind of mix it up like that. If you're an American, if you're a Christian, now there's a lot of non-religious Americans. I ain't talking to those because they wouldn't understand what I was saying anyway. But for those people who have been brought up in an organized religion and they had a picture that there was a, now the Christian picture is that Jesus in fact is God. So now he has morphed, and I'm going to show you guys how this works. And maybe you will see that I actually am a little bit more right than what you ever maybe recognize. So the question then comes, how do we get to a point to where there is one creator God, the God of the Bible, to create two gods that create the God of the Bible, and then you put all of the other pieces that I've shown you, like last week when I showed you what the Moses scroll said about the Elohim, and I showed you in the book of Genesis that it was not a singular God that created us. It was an Elohim, and we weren't made in his image. We were made in our image, which is a plural. So everything about the creation story, if you go back and get to the nuances of the Hebrew language right, everything about the book of Genesis chapter 1 is not even remotely close to what we've been told our whole lives. But the problem is we keep seeing this happen over and over again. I've been exposing for 30 years the corruptions and the falseness and the doctrines that have been created, and so it just seems like it continues to go on, and yet it's supposed to. So I want to be encouraged. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and if you're here because you choose to be, then so are you, because you obviously are a special person, and the Creator, Father, wants you to be here to hear what is not known by most people that live in this country, 365 million of them. That's a pretty big minority, friends. So my question would be this. I have many of them. First one would be, where did the God of Israel come from? Well, in answering my own question, the research led me to a completely different question, which was, where did the gods of the Christian Bible, where did they come from? And so when you begin to see that, then all of a sudden things begin to pop. And maybe many of you certainly are not Bible scholars, but maybe you're not even people who study. Maybe you were good, faithful Christians and you went to church, but you have no real in-depth knowledge other than just what you've been told by somebody. Maybe you don't have some of the questions other people who are a little more critical or are a little more into studying. They want to know more truth, and there's certainly those, and I guess both places are okay to be if it's just that's who you are. But for those of us who do study this stuff, and it then becomes, so the question I ask is, where did the God of Israel come from? And the answer to this question is actually quite appalling, because as I said, what it then took me as I read, as I studied, as I spent hours poring over ancient text and looking at scholars that have had information, some of it 200 or 300 years, there is scholarly information that has been out there. And so then I get in the middle of asking myself, well, why are we here believing this when they knew 200 years ago that this wasn't true? Is that a valid question? I mean, maybe you have that. I certainly do. And I know as dogmatic as I am about things, I'm also, as I've been told by some, I'm a very special person, because I also know how to say I'm sorry, and I also know how to change my direction when I find out my direction is not right. I don't have a lot of pride. And so where did the God of Israel come from? And so then, as I said already, that leads me to the next question, which is, where did the gods, plural, of the Bible come from? And of course, this gets us in. This thing is going to be huge, and it's going to be years, friends, just to get up to speed about what the Bible is. We are working very hard and studying constantly. And so one statement I want to make to you, because we've been through this with names. Friend, honestly, if you're still struggling with the names thing, which we have done over and over again, from Yahweh to God to Jehovah to Yahweh, it means nothing. Okay? It means nothing. If you're talking to somebody in a conversation about what's written in the scripture, then whatever name, I'm finding most scholars simply just use the name that's most prominent, which is Yahweh. And so there are scholars out there, guys that worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls, that are friends with Michael Rood, and they swear to God that Yahweh is not the God of Israel, that Yehovah is the God of Israel. What they're not telling you is, what I'm finding out is, they're saying that, and maybe at a level they're correct, but past that little arguing point that they're making there, none of it means anything anyway. And I hope over the next weeks I'll show you. My Wednesdays for a bit, maybe this week, next week, a couple more weeks, whatever, are going to be dealing with this whole thing about God, because I'm getting asked some really weird questions, and some really good questions at the same time. So I realized that we have such a picture. I was brought up in Christianity believing that there was one God of the Bible, and he was what? He was everything. He was the creator God. He was the healer God. He was El, and yet he was Yahweh. He was omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipotent. I mean, like this dude was all of it. And so it comes with much struggle that I even say to you, but that's not true. So I can then make a statement. For all of you who've been with me, I would very emphatically like to say this. Yahweh, Yehovah, Yahuwah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is not the creator of mankind, no matter what the Bible says. Okay? And I know for people that may come along, I'm a heretic, and you know what? I probably wasn't much different than them 5 years ago that I would have called someone a heretic, so I get that. The question for me isn't what name you call me. The question for me is what's true. And my truth will trump your name calling or hate or anger or whatever else that the Spirit could put inside of you. But there's no question. So what I've found in part of my journeys is that there is a thing that has gone on, which is why I started with you. For all of you ones who were blessed enough to be here with me on that Shabbat, even though it was a long day, when I took you through the flood stories that existed by several thousand years, the acts of the things that we received in the Bible, okay? I'm going to throw some little side notes out there. I may or may not get back to them to explain them, but I'm still going to put the seed out there. What is becoming clear is that the creation story of the book of Genesis is not the creation story of all mankind. What it is it is the beginnings of the story, the mythology that was concocted about the seed of Abraham. That's a pretty big deal if you grab a hold to what I'm saying. It's a really big deal. It's not about anything except for them. It's their journey. Now, if we go to the Edomites, if we go to the Ammonites, guess what they have? They have a Bible, and it's not the Bible of the Jews. Because what is appearing is that all of those other tribes are also Hebrew. They're Hebrew. Origins, whether we know it or not, we give them different names, like Palestinian. Some of the things you're watching go on right now, friend, with the people that are called Palestinians that are fighting, those people are family members. Okay? It's Hebrews fighting Hebrews. Because they have a different God, and they have a different Bible, if you use that term loosely. Their sacred texts are different. They have a different teaching, they have a different direction, they have a different perspective, they have things that overlap, like all of the great Semitic religions of the world believe that things came from Abraham. Islam claims Abraham as their father. Christianity claims, which is really, as you find this thing out, there's a lot of this that's going to really shock you how almost absurd it really is. So where did the God of Israel come from? And that's something that we're going to look at. And was Yahweh the creator God who created everything? Or if that's not the case, was the other God that is also equally intertwined in the text, and we're told is the same God, but is not the same God at all? What has happened is as time, and I'll share some of the history of how Israel's Bible came to be. And it's quite shocking, friends. It's not what we think, that this was like God is sitting over here holding the Bible, protecting it. It's been rewritten and redacted so many times, it's not even funny. And the Old Testament as we have it was not what they call canonized, which kind of means standardized. That did not happen, friends, until around 600 to early 500 BC, when they came out of bondage from Babylon. Prior to that, what is being taught today did not exist. Neither did the God exist that they worship today. And so that's a pretty big thing. Unfortunately, most Jews don't even know what I'm sharing with you guys. A friend of mine, a brother of mine in Austin sent me a thing this morning. I guess he always knows the battles that I have to go through. But he sent me a thing off of a major media site, and it said, be careful when you start teaching people history, because very quickly you figure out how many people have left you. Okay, most people don't want to hear history, the truth about what happened. They want to keep their lie. And if that's you, then I certainly am probably not the person that you need to listen to. I'm sad about that, but it's the truth nonetheless. Because it's inevitable that your holy cow is going to get sacrificed on the altar of truth. And so we have this picture that there was one God of Israel. We have this picture that he had names that were El and El Shaddai and Eloah and all of these things. And all of those things supposedly were about the God, singular. And we find over here Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Yahweh, Yehovah, whatever you want to call it, all these hundreds. And actually, I think it's, 2,000 times in the Old Testament, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, which is supposed to be the so sacred name of God that we can't say it, which is also really late in the history of Israel. I showed you, and I don't know that they're true, but they came out of the Vatican and they were hiding them from people, and they possessed them for lots of years. And we find that if in fact that is a true picture of the true Yeshua, who they use the word Jesus, that is kind of morphing. For the people that were with me, I had a desire to get you to begin to think differently. And I'll show you why that is, and you'll understand why getting rid of the name of Jesus was so important. Okay? First off, it's created, it's fake. And secondly, because the Yeshua, that person that God was created from, did live, and apparently was relatively a humble person who was a mysticist who looked for ascension and enlightenment, which is exactly what Hare Krishnas do. It's exactly what Buddhists do. It's exactly what Confucianists do. It is if you want to say it, the Far East religions. And Yeshua was one of them in spirit, even if he wasn't one of them. But we do have recorded history that Yeshua ended up, I believe, in India, and I believe he ended up in Tibet. It's written of him. He is recorded in their documents, friends. He went there as a teacher. I bet you wouldn't have believed that in your Christian Sun Worship Day church. In fact, he was noted as being a marvelous teacher because he could ascend into the spirit realm quicker than most people that they knew. Those people who studied spirituality their whole life, he could just move from being a human into his heart-based, his heart-centered person. You guys, if you stay with me, you'll get a lot more of that, and you'll begin to understand it as well. So, I asked the question, where did Yahweh come from? If Yahweh is in the Bible, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Yehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yah, whatever name you want to call him, none of them mean anything because it's about a created deity anyways. Where did he come from? And so that's where I begin my journey. So here's some of the pieces that we need to look at. But I want to make this little statement to each and every one of you, because we're gonna have to learn how to learn. We're gonna have to learn to start looking for truth instead of just following a set of rules. Which, if you saw on Saturday when we read the writing of Mosheh last week, that there was a hidden 10 that were broken. None of that exists in your Jewish Bible, because they don't want you to know that. They live by that. If you go talk to a Jewish rabbi, he will tell you that there was a written Torah. There was an oral Torah that Moses had that has been passed down through the centuries. Guess what? I read the oral Torah to you, and I read the written Torah to you on that Saturday. That was an amazing blessing. One is about the Spirit. One is about your carnal flesh, because you're not spiritual enough to separate the two. All of these people are mystics. Every one of them, folks. So, I want to make a couple of statements here, and then I'll get on. We, as individual people who are trying to learn, it's true for scholars, but they already know this. They learned that probably in the beginning of their education, but we haven't been there, so we haven't learned it. We have to be careful when we historicize a God of which all are created for one reason or another, usually a religious attempt or a political attempt to control people. Does anybody hear me? The purpose for religion, friend, is to control you. It's to give you the list so that you do all the things that we want you to do. Religion is like that. Islam is like that. Judaism is like that. Amish are like that. There's no right or wrong unless you don't do what we tell you to. And so we have to be very careful, because what we do as far as people who are trying to survive what life means, and they're going to do that, and the only way that we can have a chance of saving ourselves and freeing ourselves coming out of the unclean thing, I'm telling you, there are a lot of words of Yeshua that are once again popping up big time. But it's not even the Yeshua that I knew 6 months ago. That's why. Because another layer of lie has been wiped off, and all of a sudden you see what you couldn't see. And there's a lot of things he said that don't mean at all what we think they mean, or what we were told and programmed by Christianity they meant. That's a greater thing. So we have to be careful when we begin to religiousize or historicize something about a God who created everything. There's a reason for that, because if they can get you to believe that the God that you're serving created everything, then there must be absolute obedience to him. When you find out why that was so important, and most of you will get it before the night is over with, you will really then get to see the experience of what I'm talking about, of how religion, how much bondage it really is. It's totally for the purpose of manipulating humans. That's what religion was created for. The original religions, like the American Indians, and I've found a profound truth lately in the American Indians. Every tribe of American Indian, I'm American Indian, I have brothers that I've talked to that are Cherokee, and I'm Choctaw and Chickasaw from Oklahoma, and believe that there was a supernatural, a divine, I like divine is the more appropriate word. There was a divine creator, and for some strange reason, without a Bible or knowledge, they called that creator Father. And you'll see as we go on why that means something, because that's a universal trait. And they also had a creator that was called Mother Earth. Some of you might know it as Mother Nature. That's an Americanized version of Mother Earth, but I think essentially the value of them is exactly the same. So why did we read that Yeshua a week ago, why did he tell us that we were to wake up every morning and greet the world? Well, I think that's pretty silly and pretty easy to figure out, isn't it, brothers and sisters? It's not another dogmatic list, although I use the list because I'm trying to program that into myself. There will be a time when I no longer need the list because I remember. But the beauty of the whole concept of that 7 and 7 in Revelation is the fact that every morning we're supposed to wake up and be thankful for the earth in which we get to live as human life out on. I don't think there's anything dogmatic about that to fulfill it or not fulfill it. The fact that you become conscious of something maybe you've never been conscious of is a really good positive thing. Why? Because it's funny to me how the climate change individuals are the same people who are destroying this earth at a breakneck rate, and they want to blame it on all of us because we drive our cars too much, when in fact they're the ones that are destroying the earth and have been. And so as I began my research, I went back in history. Every American Indian tribe that I could find, friend, has a creation story and has a flood story. Now, I told you that was big by going 5,000 years from where we are into Samaria to show you the original flood stories. But I want to ask an even greater question. Where did these dumb savage Indians that lived all over this great country and all over Canada and all over Mexico, where did all of these people learn about their Creator God Father and their Mother Earth, and where did they learn that there was a flood that happened to the earth? And then I observe how the white man, the Christians, came to this country, stomped the Indians into oblivion, stole everything that they had, and now blames us for destroying the earth. Does anybody see what I'm trying to tell you? So we have to be careful when we begin to religiousize a creator. Why don't we just accept? The scriptures tell us, those that worship, it uses the terms Yahweh. Those that worship Yahweh must worship him in spirit, because God is not a human, he's a spirit. And while there is some truth with that, about 50% of that is absolutely, totally wrong thinking. How about we just worship the Father? And how about we just be thankful for the mother, our birther, the earth? Why don't we just do that? Why do we need to stop doing that? Why did the American Indians need to stop doing that and worship Jesus? Because Christianity wanted to put them in bondage. They were free. They didn't need to go to Mass. You ask an Indian about salvation, and I heard this said that about one of the most known Tiberian monks, lives up in the mountains, is never around humanity. They meditate, they ascend spiritually. And somebody asked him about the complex of salvation, and he looked at him and he said, "What's salvation? What's that? Saved from what? I'm a human. I was created to be a human, and I'm working diligently to be the best human that I can. I had to worry about being lost." You got to admit, that man lived his life in a whole lot more peace than most Christians will. Because one of the best manipulators that religion uses is fear, friend. It's fear. And I've said this recently, I do believe that there is a negative judgment that will come against some people. I do believe there is a Torah And I believe that Torah has existed since the very creation of mankind, even if that goes back 200,000 years. These principles did not come down from year to year to year to year to year, 200,000 years, and there was no beginning of them, and they have no value. I could never, I don't think I could ever believe that as well. So they came from somewhere, and there's values to us as humans about these things. And it really is the purest form of fulfilling the spiritual 10 words, is when we just do these things out of the inside of us. What if we judged everything? Know our Mother Earth, and we're going to protect her. What if we judged everything that we do based off of that? Would we have highways that were littered? No. Why would you trash something that's sacred to you? Now, and if you can begin to see this mindset, I could list out 100 different questions to ask you. But if you listen to that mindset, you very much will begin to see even the perspective that the American Indians must have had. So I thought it was strange that I'm finding through history that these American Indians who were called savages and killed ruthlessly, made to go through abominable things, were stomped religiously out of existence as far as their belief system for the most part. And all of a sudden now we begin to find who the people who did those things, what they really are. Friends, they're actually the army of the enemy. So, we have to be careful when we begin to turn things from the past, accept spiritual interpretations of them. I mean, when there's a spiritual interpretation necessary, let's get that. We need that as much as not spiritualizing something that's not physical. Maybe I've confused you, but I hope I haven't. I'm really saying a lot more than my words can convey. And as you grow and learn, I suspect you will pick up on some of that. So, it is a religion. Religion is an attempt to control people, which exacerbates the problems that we humans already have, number one, in reality, and number two, in righteousness. Many of you don't know all the times, if you haven't been with me, maybe you haven't seen the teachings I've done where prophecies have told us that there's an appointed time coming on the earth when people will instinctively know what right and wrong is. And I believe that it's a good possibility that we're already right now in the beginnings of the run towards that day. You want to call that a eschatologist, you want to call that, end times thinking, it's all of them. But I think, to be sure, just as there is with many other things, there is a rising volume all over the world of people that are starting to see things that they could never see before, and they're starting to see other things which are positive towards humanity. And so, we as thinking, well-meaning people looking for the truth, we have to learn and then practice separating history that is provable from religious doctrine and teaching. History that is provable. Because if it existed on this earth, it should have left a trace for us. And many of these things there's no trace of, and many of them there are traces of, but because they don't fit the Christian guideline, you haven't ever heard of them. And that's the worst part. So, let me move on. I want to tell you first off some history about Yahweh. Yahweh is the Yod-Heh Vav-Heh of the Jewish Bible, the Christian Old Testament. He appears in the calling of God as a singular, and I'll show you why that is, as a singular God, but it's still talking about Yahweh. Okay? So here's kind of a little history for you. I'm going to share a little of the history that I've been studying. Yahweh, how did a warrior god, a war god, become the God of the Bible? And if you haven't asked that question, then you need to ask yourself that. That should pop into your mind. How did this God, who is a God of war, and for some of you who have maybe been struggling your whole life because you see this one God that's talked about, and he's so kind, and he's so loving, and he's so wonderful, and all of the compassionate, long-suffering, and merciful, and righteous, and just. You hear about all of that, and then there appears to be this other God over here, and he's looking for you to mess up so he can kill you. And those two have been put together, and it's really hard to discern which one is which, because we were told, thank you very much for the teaching we've encountered, we were told that they were one and the same God. And that's even the worst lie. Because anybody who wrote that knew that that wasn't true. Which is the Jews when they came out of Babylon. As much as I hate to, because I loved Ezra's writings, it's very possible Ezra was a whole lot. Judaism, friends, as we know it, did not exist until they came out of bondage at the end of 500 BC. Around that time. I couldn't give you 599 BC, 593 BC. I can't tell you what year, because that's not really important to me. But what is important to me is that the Judaism that exists today, the morphing point of that existing began when they came out of Babylon. Okay? So that it tells us a couple of things, because I'm going to show you there's some other pieces that go with that. And this is a shocker for you. If you've been with me all of a sudden, guys, hey, just so you hear it, until they came out of bondage in Babylon, Yahweh was not the only God of the Israelites. Okay? Now, they've done a lot of rewriting and a lot of redacting and a lot of covering up in the Bible that we have read our whole lives. The King James, I'll just use that because it's the most generic across the board. That was made to appear to be the way that it is. That's why we've read the book of Genesis the way that we have read it all of our lives, for those of you who've been Bible studiers. And all of a sudden, I then show you that we were not. And I had somebody ask this question today. Friends, we were not made in the manner in which we think by a singular creator God. In fact, according to what I showed you a week ago, we actually were created by a group of powerful ones. We're not created in the image of God. We are created in the image of Elohim. Let us make them, plural, 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 in our plural image. We are not made in the image of a singular God. I'm sorrowful to tell you that, but that is the truth. We were created by Elohim, and I don't think we're done by a long shot with Elohim. And it's quite important that we get this straight in our minds. So Yahweh, how did a warrior God become the God of the Bible? So first off, let me ask a few questions, and I hope that maybe you can see why I would ask these questions. I always ask questions. They open doors for you, because until you question something, you never go look. If you go, I wonder if I got a flat tire, do you go out and look and check your flat tire until that thought hits your mind, and all of a sudden it says, do I have a flat tire? And then you immediately put action with it and go out. So until you begin to think and ask questions, you're not ever going to find any answers. So first, let's ask a few questions on our journey of truth, and that's what I call this, a truth seeker. I am on a journey of truth. I don't care what it is, just whatever it is, I'd like to try as much as I can to find it. Maybe some of you feel the same way. If it was religion, friend, you could never get me away from religion. If I didn't have and haven't seen the things that I've seen historically, I would have never ever considered. But it was actually the scripture that led me away from Christianity. And many other people found the same path. So on our journey of truth, let's ask a question. Where, since Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is so prominent in the Bible, where historically, and that's the key word, where historically, not religiously, not according to Pentecostals or Catholics or Baptists, not according to religion, what does the history tell us, the ancient history of the world, what does it tell us about Yahweh? And I want to show you some things. All right. It's a very good question and one that we should be asking. If we desire to know truth, we must also be able to discern what is not truth. How can you know truth if you don't know what's not truth? How can you know what's not truth unless you are on a journey to find truth? Both answers are the same. You will know neither. So the first known instances of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is in Egypt under the Egyptian king Amenhotep. And the very first time that pops up, well, strangely enough, it is not Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh at that time. It is Yod-Vav-Heh, so Yahoo, they expect is how it sounds. That was very prominent in ancient history, so it's easy to make that jump. And I've seen coins and I've seen only just a few other artifacts that carry this Yod-Vav-Heh. And they say it as being Yahoo. The funny thing is he was the god of the Shashu, with the Shashu being these Semite raiders in that area of the world. So this was a band of hellions that were like the Vikings, only of the sand. They went and they conquered and they killed and they took, and that's how they lived. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. No big deal. So that's the first place where we find even anything remotely close, Yod-Vav-Heh, Wad, Vav. And so the onlyest known reference to Yahweh that we have inscribed in ancient Paleo-Hebrew, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Well, this was found on the Mosheh Stela, and the Mosheh Stela, for those of you who may not know, it has another name called the Moabite stone. It was found where the Moabites traditionally lived. This is an ancient artifact that they found. And funny enough, it's really the first, other than the Yod-Vav-Heh, it's really the first time that they find Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in that manner. Comes out that it's around, as best I can remember, it's around 800 BC. Okay? Now stop and think about the fact. We started out at 3,300 for Sumerians in Mesopotamia, and they're teaching about gods. We started out at 3,300 BC there, and we don't even see the name of Yahweh in any recorded history until 800 BC, just a couple hundred years before Jeremiah prophesied. So this isn't like an old thing, folks. And on the scheme of, on the scheme of timelines, actually Judaism is a very new religion. So that's the earliest known reference. And funny enough, what's recorded on the Mosheh Stela, if you don't believe me, go online and you can research the heck out of this. You'll find everything I'm saying is right. So on the Mosheh Stela, at the bottom of it, pops up this thing, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It's the first recorded written time where Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh pops up into eternity, into the world of the known cosmos. And come to find, and actually it's not, it's just the world that we know as the cosmos. Those people back then knew that. But it comes, and what it says on the Mosheh Stela, King Mosheh was a king of the Moabites, and he went to Israel, he went to Jerusalem, he kicked their butts, and that's how Yahweh's name comes into the picture, because it said they went and they defeated the Judahites, and they took the bounty of the Israelites' God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. They took all of his goods, his gold and all of his stuff. They took it from Jerusalem and they took it to their God, Chemosh. So dig that. The first time Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh ever pops in to recorded history is on a Mosheh stone, and it's about them getting their rear end kicked and all of Yahweh's stuff being taken from Israel. That's this powerful God. Of course, the Jews' stories say slightly different, that King Mosheh came and the Judahites defeated him and he went home with his tail between his legs. That's the beginning of Yahweh, friends, right there. And so Yahweh was originally, so please listen to me. We've heard about Canaan. You guys know that the land that was given to Abraham was the land of Canaan. It encompasses a lot of different things. They're all over there now in the same land of Canaan. They're fighting just like they were then. And Yahweh, when he pops up initially, he's not the God of Israel. When Yahweh pops up originally, he is actually the God. I have it. Let me see here. Like I said, I've got a lot of notes. He was a god of the forger. There's a place there, a city there called Timnah. I believe it was Moabite, and they were forgers. It was the Bronze Age. They were making bronze swords for fighting. It was a really, really happening place, about like a big steel town when steel's being produced, full of money, full of people there busting everywhere. Armies are coming and buying 10,000 swords, and oh my gosh, we got to melt bronze and make them, and it was the whole lifestyle thing that we live in. But the God of the foundries. So the God Yahweh originally was a God of the forge. Would that explain to you why, by the time you get over to the Jews, almost every time that Yahweh makes himself known, there's a reference to fire? Have any of you picked up on that? Did y'all know that that's because what they're actually telling you is he was a God of the foundry? If he's a God of the foundry, you would want to present the thing that he uses the most. He wields the power of fire, doesn't he? Isn't he capable of burning bushes without them burning? Is he not capable of burning during the night in a cloud? Well, if I was going to have somebody lead 600,000 people out of bondage, and I was a God, I would show my beauty then. And it says he led them by what? A pillar of fire. Think that's accidental? Or were they actually playing off of known mythology that went before to build this God that they sold to the world for 5,000 years now? That's how huge this is. And it's just like in the New Testament, when you find out that it was rewritten and redacted. And I'm starting to believe that more, that it was actually a rewriting and a redacting, not a complete creation of the New Testament. They took things that were true and then doctored them until they got their story, which is exactly what the Jews did. So, Yahweh was originally a Canaanite god of metallurgy. He was worshipped by the Midianites. Some of you hold on to that thought for a second. He was a Midianite god in the early beginnings of it. In the northwest Arabian desert, which is also the god of Yethro. Any of you remember in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, that we're told there's an encounter where Mosheh is being overwhelmed by how many problems he got to deal with, and his wife's, his sweet honey's dad, who is the guy that he shepherded for 40 years out in the desert when he left Egypt. So you put all those things together, and now we find out that Yethro came and offered counsel to Moses on the top of the mount, and that Yahweh even agreed with him. Can I tell you why Yahweh agreed with him, friends? Because Midianite worshiped Yahweh. Now I got to ask a question. How did Moses go up there and ask all them silly questions about what he was supposed to tell the people the God was, what his name was, you know, the whole Asher, Ayah, I am that I am who I'll be? Well, unfortunately, Yethro was a priest of Yahweh. Moses lived with him for 40 years in the desert. Nothing but whatever it was, the 6 sisters and his wife and his father-in-law in the desert herding sheep. And he doesn't know what the name of the God of Jethro is. But when Jethro comes to him and gives him counsel, Yahweh agrees with Jethro. I always wondered, well, why did Yahweh agree with that guy? I mean, he's a pagan prince. But all they did is wipe the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh out of who Yethro was a priest for. They just didn't tell you that fact. You know, that whole thing that if you just keep your mouth shut and hide things from people and deceive them, at least you didn't say something that was a lie. Just because you didn't say something that was a lie and tell them that it's not true doesn't mean there's no price to pay for it. So that's how that whole story comes out. So Moses had lived with a priest for 40 years, friends, named Yahweh, that his father-in-law was a priest of, and Moses didn't know that. You might buy that. I ain't buying that. I don't believe that at all. So, the Meshech Stela takes us to about 840. We find that this Yahweh God is a metallurgy god. He was worshipped by the Midianites in the northwest Arabian desert. He's also the god of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. And as I put my little note here, make a couple of thoughts, a couple of questions come to mind about that whole deal, which I shared with you. So the first is in Genesis, says, Moses went into the desert, met his wife, and lived with them. Her father was a priest, come to find out, of a Midianite god, and then Moses accepts counsel from a priest of a Midianite god, but doesn't know that God's name is Yahweh. I'm sorry for that, don't make no sense to me. You'll take these things and listen to them, they'll help you find peace. This whole thing that's going on, man, is about finding peace. We've been under a lot of things that take peace away. So, after all of those years, his name on Sinai, as I said, it just doesn't make any sense. So here's the deal, guys. Yahweh was originally, he was a lesser god of the Canaanite pantheon. I feel compelled that maybe some of you might not quite get the concept of a pantheon, but we find it also in Elohim. Elohim is, you could say, Elohim is telling you of the pantheon of the heavenly gods. Okay, so now what that means is, here we are, we're going way back, and we're starting, and we need to know where this guy came from, and where he comes from is, he is a Canaanite god, all right? of many. So he is an Elohim in an Elohim. He's the word Elohim, the proper for us, the definition should be the powerful ones, the ones that are more powerful than us. That's what Elohim really means. A group of people who are spirit beings who are more powerful than us. And so Yahweh is one of the pantheons, the gods, and he's a lesser God. He's not really high in value. One of the traits he has is that he didn't have any people, and the Father God El gives him some children eventually, and then he has to go war to get land for them. So he's like on the bottom rung. Everybody else got nice big pieces of property and had a name, and this Yahweh comes along and they're going, throw the scraps to the kid. That changes a lot how you view the self-centeredness and the possessiveness of the nation of Israel. They were the least of everything, of everything. So, Yahweh was this lesser god of the Canaanite pantheon. I'll show you next week how the pantheon laid out, and even show you some of the names of the gods, and then even have some stuff about now when we begin to look at the Old Testament, we can start unraveling the stories. One little truth bomb I will drop is that many of you have heard the story, as I have my whole life, that Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. Okay? That's what I was told. The God, Yahweh, made him the wisest man that ever lived. Do you know what that statement is really about? You guys are going to kind of be surprised. He made him the wisest man because Solomon swore to only worship one God. See, what we don't understand, and I intend to show you, what we don't understand is, because we've been lied to, from Moses to the mesh of stone, even at 800 BC, is almost 900 years, something like that. So there's a long time between those two places. And we were told that all the stuff that supposedly Moses wrote in the Torah happened within a certain time frame. And the truth of the matter is none of that stuff could have happened in that time frame like they said it did. Okay? He is the only God. He is the single God fighting all of the other gods in the earliest part of the Hebrew Bible in Genesis. And the truth of the matter is, friends, is all the way up to Solomon's time, the Israelite people worship many gods. It has actually been proven by history that they were absolutely polytheist. And the word polytheist comes from poly, many, theist, theo, religion. So they worship many religions. What's happened in the narrative and why you grew up believing that you needed to be scared of Baal and Molech and Asherah and Ashtart and Tammuz and all of those things, why you were told that that was all bad, because those were all the enemies of Yahweh. And Yahweh said, I'm a jealous God, and I ain't going to let none of them gods. Now, he had been worshipped, just so you hear me, because I have points for these. He was worshipped in 5 separate countries before he became the God of Israel. He was worshipped by the Moabites. He was worshipped by the Edomites. But we don't understand how gods function. See, gods live, and they're immortal, but they just fall from popularity. That is to say, when the tithes drop off below $100 million, we're done with this God. He ain't producing enough. We're going to go get another. We're going to go create another God. And you may think that I'm being crass, but I'm not at all. There are multiple lineages of every one of these gods, of how they morphed. And all of a sudden what happens is you have a pantheon of gods, And what happens is they take all the traits they like from all of the gods in the pantheon, and they write those in to this one God, which is how we got Yahweh, the creator of all heaven and earth, from one of the least of the gods. That's how. It's by changing history. That's how important this is. So, he is a lesser God. He's the God of the children of Yaakov only. And so this seems such a weird statement to say, friend, but unless you're part of the family of Yaakov, there is no obligation to worship Yahweh. None. And really, if you want to be quite honest, other than it's one of the most reasonable sources of some kind of historical wisdom, and there is wisdom and there is history in it. And I think we should not ever get rid of the Bible. But what I want to tell you is that if you ever read it literal again, you've just proven that you're not very intelligent. Because it ain't nothing, it is no more real than whatever Rome wrote. How Zeus, the Greek god, morphed in to Apollo, the Roman god. And then they morphed him into another one, and then they morphed him into another one. So I'll show you guys how this works. I'm just trying. I got so much stuff to dump, and if you get it, you'll go, wow. So Yahweh was a god of metallurgy. First, he had a temple, the first temple ever that is marked and shown as being the temple of Yahweh happened in Timnah, that founding town I talked about. It's not in Israel. It's not part of Israel. The people weren't Israelites. In fact, I believe they were Moabites. And the temple that he inherited was the temple of Hathor, contrary or coincidentally to a movie we just watched last night. Hathor temple, which is an Egyptian god, used to be in there, and she fell out of favor, and all of a sudden Yahweh became in favor because he was the god of the foundry. And so they gave him her temple, scratched all her names off, stamped Yahweh on his temple. First temple of Yahweh actually was with the Moabites. That's pretty huge. And so he was in 5 different basic countries: Moabites, Edomites, Paran was another one of them. I have a list that I'll show at a later date with some other stuff. But there were 5 countries, main countries, that they knew that the God Yahweh existed. Different in almost every one of them, with the exception that he was a God of storms, okay, and he was a God of war. War and storms also kind of go together. So, but he was not the exclusive God of Israel, and he was part of a pantheon. He was one of many gods. And funny enough, the God who is God the Father, El, he is a son of him. So Yahweh, according to their mythology, could just as easily be said that Yahweh really was Jesus. Because he was the son of El. He was the son of God. And also Jesus was the son of the new God named Yahweh. So it is the parallel God creation story that I've been talking about. And I know you guys don't understand it, but Jesus is just another God that they created to get people to worship. And then gave him a whole set of rules that they could use to manipulate you and put you under bondage. It's no different than any mythology that exists on this earth. There is wisdom in it. One of the interesting things that I found recently is I started this way with Solomon in the temple. The temple that Solomon built, the first temple that we all hear about, and Solomon was so upright and all of that, It's all a concoction, friends. Those people were worshiping multiple gods. In fact, what you never will learn in the Bible, nor will you ever learn it in Christianity, is that he built the temple of Yahweh and then built the temple of Astarte, the woman goddess, next door to it, because Yahweh and Astarte were like friends. You've never one time heard that next to the temple of Yahweh was, you won't hear a Jew that'll ever would even say that. But that's the historical truth. So gradually as time proceeded, Yahweh, the God of war, the God of storms, eventually rose to the top, and in time, El, who was his father, and Yahweh were morphed together. But contrary to the storyline we have been given in the Bible, Yahweh was a lesser Canaanite god, never the God, the only God, until very late in history. So it puts in front of us and for us that this thing really does need to be examined, friends. I mean, what I'm telling you, just go pick a keyword and go put it in your phone. I guarantee you'll get 10,000 results for it. This is like so out there, and I ask myself about 100 times now, how on earth could we have been Christians, and I studied the Bible for 35 years, how on earth could I have never seen any of this? And then, of course, it dawned on me. That's why if they don't want you to study, they want you to read the Bible, if you're going to read it. And it would be best if you just didn't read it at all. Why? Because as long as all you read is the Bible, all you're going to know is what the Bible says. And since they have manipulated the understanding of what those words, now I'm telling you that there is another Bible hidden inside of what we have as a Bible, friend, and you're going to see that everything that was totally different than what we've been told it was. And you don't have to change the scriptures to do so. And that's where the big piece comes in. So if you've been concerned that I'm on the wrong track, I'm not on the wrong track. If your track is looking for truth, we're going to find some truth that we've never seen in our lives, and we'll have more peace, and we'll have more understanding, and we'll have more confidence. I'm not unconfident about what I'm learning. I'm not scared. I'm not an atheist. I absolutely unequivocally pray multiple times every day to Father God. I don't need nobody to pray through. And I also like to thank my Mother Earth for the food she provides for me. Explain that. Really not much difficulty in that, is there? I then get to choose to be good because I'm a good person. I'm stronger than maybe other people who are good people too and just refuse to do so. Somebody told me recently, I asked something about their spiritual journey, and they said, well, I believe there's a God and that's the end of it. Okay. I mean, what do you say to that? Okay. Is that your best answer? So I hope you guys haven't been bored. I'm sorrowful. I'd like to go forward, but I feel like if we don't get these things inside of us, because you're going to have times we do it constantly. Somebody will say something and I'll say, I'll say, yeah. I've been doing that for so long. When I wasn't doing that, I had problems with God and Jesus, So please, as far as that goes, be patient with me. I will help you see a lot of things that scholars know, educated people know, but even in a lot of those situations, we're finding out that not all scholars will tell people the truth. Not all scholars will reveal what they know. And so it doesn't do me much good for somebody to have 5 degrees and they won't help me. Kind of can fit that into the 10 words, can't you? What does it really mean to love your neighbor as yourself? I don't think, honestly, to be honest with you, you're going to find that the 10 words are what the law is. That is the Torah. But here's what I'm going to say. How could you even get so far corrupted that you couldn't understand that treating someone other than how you would treat yourself makes you a sinner? Nobody made you do it. All you had to do is treat them just exactly the way that you wish people would treat you. And if you do, karma will kick in. If you do, the law of sow and reap will kick in. Because it's kicked in no matter how you're acting. The only question is do you get the blessings or do you get the bad stuff? And nobody did that to us but us. Why is it important to be honest? Why is it important to be truthful? Why is it important? Because you love people. You don't want to deceive them. So the essence of what we're finding, I don't really personally find the principles of the Bible that have to go away. In fact, if it wasn't for the Bible, I would have never been led to this truth. Never. So it was both a blessing in bringing me up, and it was a blessing in me leaving it. And we'll be reading lots of scriptures, I promise you. So, but I want you guys to understand. So now, on leaving the service for next week, because I'll break some of these things as I've said I would, I'll break them down a little better. But we leave this week with y'all having answered a question: is Yahweh the only God, Creator God? And I think I can safely, I hope I've shown you that. If not, take what I've given you and go spend hours researching, and you'll still find out that what I said was true. I don't discourage that. I think you should if you question what I'm saying. I question it. But I also have the information in front of me, and it's quite obvious when 10,000 people know that the answer is yes, and you keep saying no because you've been over here hid in a box in Dante's cave and you're scared to come out. You know what I mean? You want to keep your head stuck in the sand so you don't see the truth, so you don't have to worry about changing. Good luck. I hope that works for you, but I kind of think I'd rather change and just get on with it. But, so I answered that question for you. He's not the God he's not the creator that we see in the Bible that we've been told. And so I'm going to throw this little nugget in there for you for the beginning of next week. Not only is the Bible, is he not the only God in the scriptures, he's not the only God of Israel. And so we'll pick up some of the history, how that stuff works, how it lays out. If you want to pray to Yahweh, by all means, knock yourself out. Okay? You do whatever you want to. I don't have no answers. I just have the answers that he's not what we were told he was. And with that, then you can choose to do with that whatever you want to. But I assure you, if you do the right thing with it, it'll be a huge blessing to you. This is not meant to hurt anybody. This is meant to free us. He that the Son sets free, well, there was a metaphor that they used about the Yeshua that he's said to have said that I am the Torah. And I think what he was telling us is that he is the exemplification of how we're supposed to be. Yes, we got that. But the Torah, if the Torah is only the 10 words, then he was the exemplification of the 10 words. And if what we read a week or two ago is true, and Yeshua told and very quite convincingly told his followers, do not follow the scriptures. Now, that's a good little piece to hide if you don't want people to know that. Because that's a pretty damning statement that Yeshua, and so I'm going to throw another bomb with that. There's now some historical evidence that seems to be popping into front of me that in reality there were actually two Jesuses, Yeshuas. They weren't Jesus, they were Yeshua still. But there were two Yeshuas that lived at that time. One of them was a Essene zealot fighter, and one of them was a humble preacher. And that's all he was. No different than me. He was just somebody who had a desire for the truth. And that history is beginning to come out. So, there's been a lot of people, friend. I don't know who you are. I don't know if you know me. I don't know if you like me or whatever. But what I do have to say is that there's been a lot of concerted effort to keep us inside the matrix. And I'm just not a matrix guy. You know what I'm saying? I don't want you to lie to me, and it's okay because I'm stupid and don't know. I got no problems in telling you that that's exactly how I feel. How about that you just don't lie to me? I'm big boy. I'll deal with it on my own. But don't tell me it ain't the truth when it is. I think that's anything but loving your brother, right? You not only lie, you condone the lie. Sometimes we have to lie and we don't really say that it's okay, but somebody asks you a question and you're trying to be kind. Some woman walks in, as the preacher said, the woman walked up to the front door on Sunday morning, got her best on, and made some comment, and the preacher made a statement that, it was a little bit less than kind about, I'm glad you think you're pretty because you need to change your clothes. And, of course, that never did sit well at the front door of the Christian church while you're shaking hands and glad-handing people. So if you're a preacher, then by nature you have to learn how to lie. But if you told everybody the truth, friend, you wouldn't have no people following you. How do I know? Because I'm the truth. I'll be honest with you. So we're blessed. We're going to find out Yahweh. We're going to find out who El is. We're going to also find out about the other Canaanite gods that were worshipped at the same time. And some of you will remember those names, but you won't remember them in the context in which I'm going to present them, which has to do with they're not what the Bible said that they were, because that was written after they existed. So anyway, let's pray. Father, bless you tonight. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your wonderful mercy and all the blessings you've given us. I just ask you that you help these words to go out. Little different style, little different things. I have to. And so I do ask you that you give us the courage to understand, first off, what we got to deal with which is the truth. And if we deal with that in the right manner, then it will lead us to truth. And yet again, if we deal with that in the wrong manner, then it will keep us in bondage. And maybe there are folks here that want to be in bondage, and I guess that's fine if that's what they want. But as for me and my house, I want to know what the truth is. And so I thank you today, Spiritual Father, that you love us so much that you would put the universe in perfect order. And it seems as if the only thing in the universe that gets out of order is humans. And so I thank you truly for the spiritual kindness that you show us. Inevitably, whatever it may be, may your will be done. And may some of us get to experience an even greater life because we're walking in your eternal law. So I thank you for it today. I ask you that you help all of us to see the light. Amen. Dave? All right, friends. Shalom to each and every one of you. I hope you've had a wonderful week. The ones I've talked to seem to be having a very good week. And so we should begin, and we should begin to expect, if we'll listen and pay attention, that we should expect for our lives to get better, and yet at the same time make more sense, and we have more peace. Doesn't mean that we massively even change who we are. It changes our perspective of how we look at who we are. So my blessings, as Yeshua said, may you go in peace. Shalom.